Well, the subcommittee of the SPL board met today, and we determined that the December salaries, which remain unpaid at today's date, they must be paid by Wednesday the 11th of January. There will be interest awarded on all sums overdue, and costs and expenses have also been awarded against the club, both the claimant's costs and the SPL's cost of the hearing. The January salaries must also be paid in full by the 16th of January.
And if they're not?
Well, that would then be the subject of a separate process, and I wouldn't want to predict what the outcome would be.
What sort of penalties could be in place or could go in if Hearts are in breach of any further rules?
Well, today's decision, I think, reflects fully the seriousness with which we regard the late payment of player salaries. We've made very clear orders today about what needs to be paid and by when, and in the event that any of those orders are not met in full, then that would come back to the SPL board to consider at that point.
Are you confident that Hearts will pay their players?
Well, I think what we can do as a board is to be clear about what we expect. The orders have been very clear today about what we do expect and what needs to be paid by when, and if any of those orders are not met, then that would be something that would come back to the SPL board to debate further at that point.
Is it possible that the club could have something like a transfer sanctions on them to stop them getting money by selling players before the wages are paid?
There's certainly no intention whatsoever to stop any club from selling any assets that it wishes. That's why we've made the orders today that are very clear about what remains outstanding, by when it needs to be paid, the interest on those sums that need to be paid, and in the event that any of those sums are not paid, then that would come back to the board at that point to consider.
Neil, should Hearts fail to make these payments, would points deduction be a possibility?
I'm not going to speculate on what might ultimately be the outcome in the event that any of those orders are not met in full. We've been extremely clear today about what we expect to be paid and by when, and we'll be monitoring the situation closely to see if those orders are met in full or not.
How damaging has this been for Scottish football?
I don't think damaging to Scottish football really comes into it. I think players sign player contracts with an expectation that they will be paid. Certainly in the UK, the situation may be different in other parts of Europe, but in the UK, I think clubs have a proud record of paying on time. Where payments are not made on time, I think that's a serious issue, and today's orders reflect fully the seriousness with which we regard that.
Clearly you met with Hearts legal representatives today. Clearly they must be confident that they can fulfil these payment dates.
Well, I think all we can do as the subcommittee of the board is to be clear about what we expect, and the orders that we've made make that entirely clear.
Are you worried about Hearts' future, Neil?
I think ultimately we need to respond to anything that arises. I think what we have to do is to be clear about what we expect, and we expect that the payments that remain unpaid to date have to be paid in full by next Wednesday. January salaries must be paid in full by the due date, the 16th of January, and interest and costs have been awarded, and I think those are the powers that we have, and we've used them today.
Effectively though, if no money comes from Lithuania and the club's owners, then no money will be paid. Is that the way you see it?
Well, the way we see it is that we have to respond to what has to be paid, and the salaries for October, November and December were late. December's salaries remain unpaid as of today's date. The orders that we've made today reflect what has happened, and rather than prejudge or try and second guess what will happen in the future, I think we can only respond to what has happened.
If Hearts were to qualify for Europe this season, Neil, would this situation affect their ability to play in Europe next season?
Well, that's an issue for the SFA. They deal with licensing, and they award licences for clubs to play in Europe or not.